Good evening and welcome to another episode of the Taco Society Presents.
It's good to see you, Tony.
Good to see you. It's a cold day out there today.
Sure is. It sure is. You're Tony Tremblay.
Yes, I am. It's a cold day out there, Phil. And I'm Tony Tremblay, and Sydney's not here with us, as you can see. She had a medical procedure done, I think it was last week.
Yeah, I believe it was
last week.
Yeah.
And she's still recovering, but she promises us she'll be back next month. Let's cross our fingers and hope that she's right.
Yeah. Hopefully she recovers fine as well.
Yeah.
And I'm Phil Perron.
Phil Perron. Should we start over?
No. But it's hilarious how you mentioned that. It's freezing. It's 22 degrees, and it's spring.
And the winds are so strong, it feels like it's 0 degrees out there.
Oh, it's crazy.
Oh, it's nuts. Yeah, this is the March show. If you're tuning in, on YouTube and seeing this much later, and we've been having just the craziest weather: warm, cold,
Indeed.
and now we're in a cold spot. Not much has happened over the last month since our last meeting.
Yeah, that's true. A couple of big stuff with like Stephen King and such, and that you'll be bringing up, but not too much right here with
yeah,
us.
not in New England. There hasn't there haven't been any conventions. Although I heard Kamikaze was last week, but I didn't even know about it. Didn't even hear about it.
Yeah.
So, but you got some releases you want to talk about?
A friend of the show, Eric Brown. We've not interviewed him because he's down in North Carolina, but he actually has two brand new releases from Severed Press. And one's called Operation Hive Strike, which is basically a serial killer horror novel. And then the other is Dropship Marines, which is a sci-fi thriller about rip-off-your-face monsters in the Marines.
Guy's a machine, isn't he?
It's unbelievable.
Yeah. He's also the Chud. Have you got a story in the Chud?
He's doing the editing for a book based off of the movie Chud, where the producer and director of that movie are actually part of it. They're actually have the foreword and all that, and it was an open call to have 20 or so stories that were related to the movie by news stories, and I actually was one of the stories that got in coming out at the end of the year.
Oh, it's the end of the year. Good.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, he's been working on that one, quite proud of it. So let's hope that's a huge success for you and him, obviously.
Yeah. There's a lot of good authors in it, including some folks that haven't. David Bernstein. I don't know if we actually had him on the show when we were at Anthicon, but he's in there, and he's out of New York City, and a number of other folks. So.
Good. Great. Looking forward to Chud. You mentioned some Stephen King news. It's always big news when Stephen King comes out with something, and he's got a lot of things coming out with. It was coming out in the next, I want to say, a couple months, or right now, as a matter of fact.
At least 2017, anyway.
2017. Well, I know Gwendy's Button Box was released, and that's sort of a short story novella that King wrote with Richard Chismar, the gentleman who runs Cemetery Dance.
Oh, how about that?
Yeah, and that's been getting some really good reviews. And here's the big surprise. He and his son, Owen King.
Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah, have a book coming out called Sleeping Beauties. I'm not quite sure when that's coming out. I think it's fairly soon, hopefully within a month or two.
Yeah, you know the premise? It's kind of interesting.
I did know the premise.
It's about all women fall asleep and get cocooned one day, and the men.
One woman stays
immune.
Yeah, immune from this. If when they wake up, either they go crazy or they're in another dimension or another place.
Exactly.
And there's one woman that seems to be immune, and they think she's a witch.
Right.
It's a crazy premise, but it sounds like it'd really be cool.
Yeah, it sounds like it's like a post-apocalyptic type of sci-fi type thing.
Yeah. Also, the poster for the Dark Tower movie was released, and that was a cool poster.
Yeah.
He's walking down the street, and everything's upside down, all the skyscrapers and everything else.
There you go. Yeah.
That was a great book, or a great series of books. I read them all. And you got one, Stephen King.
The trailer for It was released at a convention conference just like a couple of weeks ago, and it scared the pants out of people. People
really
raved about it, and it was surprising because it's been in purgatory where there's been a lot of problems during the production of the thing, but the trailer came out and people were the hype is back up again.
Well, the word is Stephen King liked it. So that goes a long way to giving it some credibility.
Yeah, indeed.
He also has a short story called The Music Room, in a anthology coming out called In Sunlight or in Shadow. And the real, I think, horror news for most people in New England is Dunkin' Donuts is getting rid of their coffee colada.
Is that really true?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh,
And they're
how
going
about
to
that?
replace it with an energy drink. And already people all over New England are screaming and running down the streets. I expect blood.
Yeah.
It won't be good, but we'll see what. If you're in New England, you know exactly what we're talking
I
about.
like the idea of the energy drink, but
Yeah.
to lose the colada, that's tough.
That is tough, yeah.
Yeah.
And I've got two last things. MJ Preston re-released the Equinox. You know
Yep.
our friend MJ Preston.
Yep, yep. I don't know if he's been interviewed, but he's from Canada, and he's a friend of the show.
Yeah, he is. Nice guy.
Yeah.
And Invocations, another
Oh yeah.
release that you're affiliated with.
Yeah, that's right.
What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, it's basically a horror anthology about invocations, basically, and
Which means spells.
yeah,
and,
things of that nature.
Mhm.
Yeah, and so it's got a tentative release date of the first week of July.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and it's going to be bookend with a big story by MJ Preston, as a matter of fact. So a 12,000 word novella that will be part of the anthology, and I believe you're a part of it.
Yeah, I am. Yeah, I have a story in it.
Yeah,
Yes, thank
yeah.
you.
Yeah, so that's good. So that'll be coming out first week of July by Great Old Ones Publishing, and it has the cover and all that ready to go. So.
Well, I think I'm in. I never got a contract.
Oh, right.
So-
Well, yeah. I mean, it's. I think it's supposed to be picking up in April.
Okay.
Is when all that stuff is going to be.
The last thing we'll talk about before we get to our guests is movies. I saw a great movie the other day called Lights Out, which you also
Yeah,
really enjoyed.
I enjoyed it tremendously. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's actually originally what happened was some guy out of Sweden, a guy named Sandberg is his last name, directed like a 5-minute movie, and he called Lights Out, and he put it on YouTube, and someone saw it and thought it was great, and they hired him to make a feature-length film, and it was produced by Hollywood.
Wow.
Yeah.
The movie's only an hour and 15 minutes. It's a
Right.
short movie, but you know, as I mentioned on Facebook, there's no filler in this. I mean, from the start to the end, it's just all action. There's some exposition, but it's intense. There's no
Yeah,
fillers, no red herrings. This thing just gets right to the point.
Yeah, and it stars. Unfortunately, I forget the woman's name, but she's
beautiful.
She's incredible looking. Yeah, yeah. But she's an Australian actress, but she plays a good American accent,
Mhm.
and she was in the movie Warm Bodies, which is a zombie
Oh.
film. So she's well known in the genre.
Yeah, I'll have to look for that. I've seen it advertised on cable.
Oh yeah, that's a good book. That's a good movie too.
And the other movie I saw was Get Out, which I absolutely loved.
Oh yeah,
I
yeah,
thought
Get
that
Out,
was
yeah.
fantastic.
Yeah,
movie.
I saw that too. That was a quite good
Yeah,
movie.
it was.
For first-time director. Actually, both were first-time directors, Lights Out and Get Out.
Maybe that's the key to horror
Yeah.
movies, getting some
Maybe.
fresh new blood in there with some great ideas.
Yeah. True. I did see Belk Go Experiment, which is a horror film too, that directed by Greg McLean, the Australian director that did Wolf's Creek, and written by James Gunn, the guy that did Guardians of the Galaxy.
Yep.
And that was really good.
Good.
I enjoyed that too.
I've got to look for that. And there was
Yeah.
another one you mentioned. I should watch Train to
Train to
Busan.
Busan,
Yeah.
the Korean film that's very similar to Zack Snyder's Dawn of the Dead, or World War Z,
Mhm.
either of those two films, and Korean version of that. It's really good.
Good.
And then Autopsy of Jane Doe.
Yes.
Yeah, that's really good. Yeah.
I'll look forward to
There's a
watching
lot of
them.
good horror films that came
Yeah,
out
there
within
is.
the past,
Yeah, there's
3 to
been
5
a
months.
dearth of them.
Yeah.
But now they're just everywhere.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for listening to our introduction. We're going to come back with our guests in a moment. We're back with John Dennehy. John, good to see you.
Nice to see you.
John, how are you? Nice to meet you.
Nice to see you, Phil.
Yeah, the last time we saw each other was at the New England Horror Writers Christmas party,
I think so. Yeah.
which was in February.
Yeah.
it was a late party.
It was, and that was a lot of fun, and it was good to see you. So when it came to scheduling tonight's guest, John's name popped into my head, and I'm glad you came. Glad you could come.
I'm very glad to be invited.
Great, great. You got a bio to read.
I do. So let me read John's bio before we get into some questions, and then you can do some reading.
Okay.
All right. John W. Dennehy is a writer of suspense, horror, and thrillers. His novel, Clockwork Universe, is his latest release, and he has 2 novels planned for release in 2017. His stories have appeared in Snafu, Wolves at the Door by Cohesion Press, Winter Shivers, SQ Mag, Disturbed Digest, Sanitarium Magazine, Voluted Dreams Magazine, Beyond Science Fiction, Calliope,
Calliope?
Calliope, is that how you say it? Yeah, very well. The J.J. O'Tura Review, Type House Literary Magazine, The Literary Hatchet, The Haunted Travelers, Volume 1 and 2, Bones 3, Dark Monsters, The Stray Branch, Dual Coast Magazine, Shotgun Honey, and Micro Horror. John grew up in a small cottage on a lake in New Hampshire, which he attributes to his creativity. After graduating from Pinkerton Academy, he enlisted in the U.S. Marines, serving with MALS 26, or M-A-L-S?
Mal's 26.
MALS 26 Patriots. Then he earned a degree in English Creative Writing at UNC Wilmington and presently lives in New England.
Again, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
We're going to start off on your last book, Clockwork Orange. I don't know if you can get a picture of that, but let's talk a little bit about it. The genre of this book is called steampunk. I've never read a steampunk, so this was the first steampunk book I ever wrote. For the benefit of the people who also haven't read steampunk, can you describe what that genre is like?
Yeah, the steampunk genre basically has a couple of branches. Steampunk can fall under science fiction, and it can fall under fantasy. So some writers will tend to go with one direction or the other. The fantasy avenue often has action-adventure themes. Steampunk is set in an alternate world. So it's not meant to be a time travel where you're taken back in time, but it's an alternate world that what often utilizes or encompasses Victorian dress and attire and attributes of the Victorian era. And it also deals with a world where steam powered gadgets dominate. So some of it's just steam locomotives, steam buggies, but they also utilize like modern day technology in this era that have some type of steam attribute, or so in the book there's like a laptop computer, but it's decked out in hardwood, that sort of thing. So
There's a lot of gears too. And
yeah,
stuff,
a lot of gears and cogs, clockwork, time. So sometimes there's an aspect of time and alternate dimensions involved with steampunk, but it doesn't have to be.
In this book, there's a gentleman, young man in the present, and I guess he falls asleep, and when he wakes up, he's in this alternate world. I had the impression that he went back in time, but what you're saying is since it's an alternate world, it could be the present, but only in a different world.
He just travels through another dimension. Yeah.
Boy, that's odd, huh? It's
Yeah.
hard to wrap your mind around it when you read the book, because everything is Victorian or everything is late 19th century. It's fun, but you're just thinking, wow, this is their present.
Right.
There's
But
no
time travel would take you back. If you went back to Victorian Boston, there would be handsome cabs, but there wouldn't be steam buggies,
Right.
and there wouldn't be some of the gadgets and things that happen in the steampunk world. The reason why I used that character is because I did read a lot of steampunk to write the book, and I found that a lot of times it's written where you dropped into a steampunk world and everybody's in that world. So if everyone's in that world, they don't necessarily take notice of little things.
It's natural, yeah.
Right. And so I decided I wanted this to be a viewpoint of an outsider coming in and noticing the world, so the reader kind of comes into a steampunk world and absorbs it like you did. So it's kind of he's coming like you are, the reader, and seeing it.
Mm-hmm. What's the allure of steampunk? Why do people gravitate to it? Why do they like it so much?
It's an interesting thing. I think it's one of these things that has become more of our everyday culture than some people realize. And one aspect of it is if you see the beginning of Doctor Who, which is a very popular show, there are some, just the beginning of it, there's some cogs and time numeration it's a steampunk type of of aspect, and it's just I think it's a fantasy world, so just like Harry Potter or something interesting that anything can happen.
It's someplace to escape to.
Right, exactly, someplace different. And
With the added bonus, I'm guessing, is that there's not a lot of technology to weigh someone down if they're visiting these worlds. Everything is pretty pure. I say pure, pretty simple.
It can be. There's sometimes some steampunk. They actually have like the airships, and they actually it's almost like pirates or
like Sky Captain.
Yeah, they're fighting in they're having these air battles, like almost like
ships.
USS Constitution flying through the air and cannons and all that. So they can be elaborate. But I just think the idea, if the side of it of the steampunk is fantasy based, it's kind of like the Harry Potter, where it's just kind of an escape, and you're in this world, and this thing happens, and that. And
The allure, I can see the allure. It just sounds like it'll be a lot of fun, a place to visit that would be fun.
yeah.
One of the things I noticed in your novel, again, all this is new to me, so I'm kind of, and I'm digging it. I'm really enjoying it, but things are extremely detailed. I mean, really finely detailed. Even the minutia sometimes is detailed. Is that also a part of the steampunk mythos?
Yeah, it's funny, as in reading a lot broadly of steampunk, what you're going to find, I think one of the setbacks of the genre and why it's not as widely read is that it's the minutia is huge, and the detail, and it's often written like you're reading like William Makepeace Thackeray. They take it and put the Victorian spin on it to the point where the writing style is very stilted. So what I wanted to do with my book was have some aspects of that writing, but if you read these other books and then read mine, you'll think mine's a lot faster paced. And so the comparison is I peppered these pieces into it, but I didn't like bog it down. And another aspect of steampunk writing is sometimes what's going on is a little bit obscure, and I tried to make mine a little bit more focused so that you can follow it.
Okay.
Now, being steampunk, the title is really obviously effective because it's called Clockwork Universe, and there's gears and all that. Why don't you tell us a little bit about like a synopsis and such?
Synopsis of the book. The book is basically a story of Kevin Barnes, who's from southern New Hampshire, and he gets on a regular commuter rail in Haverhill, and some guy hands him a case, and he gets on the commuter rail, and then that case turns out to be something magical, and he wakes up and he's on a steam train, and he's in a new world, and he has to try to find out how he's going to survive and navigate through the world. And while he's on the train, again disembarking from the train, he meets a great hunter who's been dispatched from Britain to track down these rhinoperds that are loose in the city. And so Kevin sort of teams up with them and meets this young woman on the train, and they sort of start to have a little bit of a dalliance, and they get involved with this elaborate monster hunt, basically. So it's like an action adventure tale.
It's you never even that I recall. You don't go into who the guy was that gave him the suitcase. That's still kind of left up in the air. So that might be for a sequel later on, or is that?
Yeah, I mean, there's the Roland who gives him the suitcase does appear at the very end. Once again, he's on the train again.
Once he's back on, right?
Right. Yeah. So,
but you don't know much about him.
You don't, and the idea is that that's going to unfold. There's going to be at least one or two more of these books.
There is.
Yeah.
Now, is it the train and so forth? Is it an alternate metro line to Boston, or is it a completely different place altogether?
It's sort of, don't go into a spoiler. What you know is that Kevin is given this case, and later Kevin opens the case and finds something in there that is unique to him, and so the metamorphosis of Kevin through this dimension is tied to the case.
What I really enjoyed was the time period, and you're saying it's the present there, but that whole Victorian era and the prim and proper English characters in there, and basically what happens in your book, and I don't think this is a spoiler, is America loses the war to England. We are now colonies again to Great Britain. That was a lot of fun. How much thought went into that? How much did you research did you put to make all that work out?
You asked me. I think coming in this about there's a lot of research in the book. I read a lot about steampunk. I read a lot about these different eras, and so it's an alternate world. So what I did was, from my world, I created an aspect that's Victorian, which is very unique to steampunk or common in steampunk. But then what I did was I wanted something a little bit different, and so I put an infusion of a little bit like early 1900s. They talk about the Great War, so they had their own Great War, and some of the weaponry and all that ties into that time period, and so the research goes into how to pull that off, what was going on. So if you're going to use something, you want it to be consistent with each other.
Now, since it's a monster hunt and there's obviously weapons and so forth in it, when you wrote the weapons for the book, did you follow basic steampunk, since you've read many steampunk books, the same type of weaponry, or did you make your own up?
Some of it you'll see in other steampunk books. Some of it, because I wanted these to be like great hunters, sort of like the Ernest Hemingway, the Gibbs rifle, the Weatherby, that goes along with that, and that's something that I infused into the book I hadn't seen in other steampunk. But I made sure it was consistent with the errors that I was dealing with.
That was impressive, what you did with those weapons. We're running out of time here, so let me ask you one more thing. I really enjoyed the novel, and one of the things that I thought was super clever was your tunneling system underneath the city with the monsters. How do you pronounce that?
Rhino birds.
Okay.
Rhino birds, yeah.
They travel through this elaborate system of tunnels, which all comes back to the steam generation plant. How did that come to your mind? Did you base that on something?
Oh, I figured it was a steam world, and that's the only time I've ever seen this. But I think my book tends to be more fantasy, action, adventure driven, but hard science fiction often deals with either hard science or engineering. So I infuse steam engineering into the book, and that actually comes from my personal life. I've had a lot of exposure with steam engineering and steam engineering companies. So they use these. Even like if you go to UNH, there's a cogeneration facility that feeds steam to the dormitories. So it's sort of built around that idea, only more elaborate for a city.
Yeah, and you literally have it going throughout the whole city.
Exactly, right. So it's a massive operation, and of course there's a hint to there that something's going on at that facility that in the space and time and dimensions.
There was at the end. Again, I don't want to spoil it because. I just don't want to spoil it. I don't want to let people know what's going to happen. But it's a great book. If you get a chance, pick up Clockwork Universe by John Dennehy. What do you got coming out next?
The next book is Pacific Rising. It's also by Severed Press. It's a kaiju thriller, and it's got Navy SEALs. It has United States Marines, a joint task force, a lot of exciting things, some strong female characters. Warriors, so I'm looking forward to wrapping that up and getting that
sounds
out.
Great too. Was a lot of your Marine background in that too?
Yeah, actually the book is dedicated to a former colleague of mine that passed away a couple of years ago.
Oh, geez, sorry to hear that. Well, you gonna read for us? Love
sure,
to hear.
That's yeah. I figure I'll just read the first chapter and give you a feel for it. So Sarah shivered from an early autumn chill as she trode up Park Street towards her family brownstone. An ominous feeling of dread crept over her along with the brisk weather. The evening seemed grim and lonely. She pulled up the collar of her Victorian dress in an effort to ward off the cold. Gas lanterns cast an intermittent glow from occasional lampposts, making the sidewalk appear desolate. A cacophony of sounds emanated from nearby Tremont Street. The noises were comforting when she had plied her way through the major thoroughfare. Steam buggies honked and revelers traipsing to taverns bellowed. Now, the distant clamor made her trek seem all the more isolated and frightening. She took a deep breath and grabbed hold of her billowing dress, pulling it above the ground in order to free up her laced-up boots. Then she huffed and picked up her pace, trotting down the brick sidewalk. Boston Common lay below, an expansive public park boxed in by Park Street and Tremont Street. At night, the park appeared eerie, with the bare branches of tall, dark trees rattling in slight gusts of wind. She sought to avoid the park, being careful to take the long way around it. The park had become the scene of grisly murders. Now she felt even more vulnerable than she'd likely experienced walking directly through the common. A harsh noise suddenly caught her attention. Sarah came to a halt at the sound of metal creaking. Her pulse quickened and her heart pounded. The thought of becoming the next victim consumed her, while fear drained her resolve and paralysis locked her feet in place. Then the familiar clopping of hooves set her at ease. A moment later, a hansom cab rounded the curb and rolled over the cobblestone street. The driver nodded from his perch, and Sarah smiled in return. Her trepidation slipped away as a grin appeared on her face. She watched the horse-drawn buggy plod uphill, and then it turned a corner and slipped out of sight. The clip-clopping faded, leaving her alone once again. The street fell silent, except for the repeated clicking of her heels. Sarah picked up her stride, and the sound of her boots muffled any other noise. Not much chance she'd hear someone approach from behind her. She slowed her pace and listened intently. A footfall reverberated from the shadows. Sarah couldn't be certain whether it was a traveler or a steam pipe coming to life in a nearby apartment. She slackened her gait, and her hearing became more alert. The unmistakable sound of a leather shoe smacked the brick, and then repeated as though someone was walking nearby. She eased her pace further, and the stalker followed suit, matching her stride, as if trying to mask his steps with hers. Sarah came to an abrupt halt. The footsteps broke off, confirming her suspicion. "Who's there?" Sarah said defiantly. No answer followed. "Tell me who's there," Sarah repeated, "or you'll be sorry." "Just a weary passerby," said a man after a moment. "Show yourself," she demanded. A scrawny man stepped from the shadows of an alleyway. He wore a tattered top hat and dusty overcoat. She discerned his bloodshot eyes in the flickering light of a gas lantern fixed to the facade of a brick apartment building. He forced a smile, but his jowls still drooped. The man shuffled closer, displaying decayed teeth, yellowed and black. Sarah could smell booze on his breath from 4 feet away. Liquor and body odor wafted through the cool air. The wretched man was detestable. A desire to kick him in the crotch and flee overwhelmed her. He stared at her too long without saying a word. A creepy desire lingered in his slovenly eyes. The urge to bolt consumed her thoughts. "Tell me what you want," Sarah pressed. "Wondering if you can spare a few pounds," he replied. "Not sure you can be trusted," Sarah said. "Stalking me and all." "How about a few shillings, then?" Sarah shook her head. Then he trundled forward, staggering completely out of the alley. The filth became more palpable, and his stench reeked something fierce. "Afraid I cannot help you," she said flatly. "Won't you consider helping out a wayward barrister in some need?" "You shouldn't creep up on people like that," she snapped. "My apologies." He forced an untrustworthy smile. "Didn't want to alarm you is all. Seem to have done so anyway. Just a few shillings and I'll be on my way." Sarah figured the moment she reached into her purse, he'd pounce and filch everything of value. The bum would bang her up good in the process. "Sorry, but I must get going now," she finally said, and began to turn away. He shuffled half a step forward, and that's when Sarah realized her mistake. A set of beady eyes gleamed at her through the shimmering light, totally devoid of reason and lacking compassion. The beggar's abject poverty had detached him from humanity. Sarah cringed and contemplated acquiescing to his demands. She reached for her purse, slung over her shoulder. His eyes lit up in anticipation. Then he leaned closer and licked his lips, wetting them with his tongue. An expectation of drink consumed him. Sarah noticed him slip a hand into his trouser pocket and registered her mistake in trusting him immediately. The movement caused her to take a step back. With a swift motion of his hand, a knife came into view. A click resonated in the night, and then a metallic blade reflected in the lamplight. Sarah's muscles grew tense. Her senses intensified, becoming more acute. Her mind instantly registered that flight was not an option. She would have to fight the bastard. Sarah hurled a boot upward. The blow missed his groin and struck her attacker in the gut. He keeled over and let out a groan. Then she grabbed the handle of her purse and swung the bag roundhouse into his head. Sarah's handbag cracked into his pate and sent him stumbling backward. He bellowed in pain, reaching for his head. A confused look crossed his face. The brick walkway reverberated from a heavy thud in the alleyway. A menacing claw latched onto the beggar's shoulder. Long talons shredded his topcoat and cleaved into his skin. Blood squirted in the air as he screamed in agony. Terror now registered in his former predatory eyes. An effortless yank of the massive paw, and her attacker whisked out of sight. Sarah heard the shrill wailing of his screams as she fled up the sidewalk. His shrieks abruptly cut off, leaving only a horrific, deafening silence. Then the ground began to thunder behind her.
Nice, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, great. And you got a sequel coming to that sometime.
Sometime.
Yeah. Good for you. I hope it really does well.
Thank you.
Yeah, read the reviews. The reviews were good, and hopefully you're on a roll here.
Hopefully.
Yeah,
Hopefully.
great. Well, thank you very much.
Thank
yes.
you. All right. Great.
Great. That was John Dennehy, and we'll be back in about 60 seconds with our next guest. Welcome back.
Yes, this is Rick Feitelberg. That's how you pronounce the name, right, my friend?
Feitelberg.
Feitelberg. All right, how about that?
Hey.
Well, it's one of those, what is it, Swedish, Norwegian, German?
German.
There you go, yeah. So.
Actually, we think it's German, but my great-grandfather is from Russia.
Oh, there you go.
They were probably pushed east at some point.
Nice. All right, so we have you as our second guest tonight to talk about some of your work, but we have a lot of questions for you. But before we do that, Tony, you have his bio.
Yeah, I do.
Can you say his last name correctly?
Feitelberg.
Feitelberg.
There you go. All right.
I'm going to skip it altogether, though. Rich is a poet and a novelist. In addition to the books in his popular fantasy series, you're going to have to pronounce
Argoril.
Argoril, the
Yeah.
Argoril cycle. I looked at that twice, and I thought I had him, and I didn't. I'm glad
Hey,
you said it.
when the author can't even say it.
Well, I'm a little dry here. So.
Rich has several collections of short stories and poems available from his website and from his fine booksellers worldwide. Rich has a Bachelor of Arts in English from Worcester State College. His Master of Arts is in Technical Communication and was received at Bowling Green State University.
Mm-hmm.
Welcome to the Taco Society
Thank
again.
you.
Yep.
Yeah, excellent. And so let's start talking about what you write, and then we'll talk about some of your work. So I know you've dabbled in monsters and scary things, and we usually have a lot of horror writers on, but tonight we have fantasy type authors. And
Equal time.
yeah, so what is it about fantasy that you love, and are you more high fantasy or a sword and sandal, and what does that mean?
Yeah, I'm not big on the classifications.
Okay.
But what attracted me originally, I think, was magic.
Okay.
Okay. Some of my favorite characters are wizards.
Yep.
Certainly in the stuff that I'm writing, my fantasy series, the wizard in the story is one of my favorite characters, and apparently the favorite of some of my readers as well, from what I get when I talk to them. So I think that's the initial draw. But then it turns into so much more, because in order to build the world, I have to learn so much about history, and which I have a love for anyway. And then it gets to be creative, because I get to then craft it any which way I want to. And then I get into the design of coats of arms for the individual governments, for example. It gets very detailed. So there's all kinds of things that appeal to me.
Now, since you said you like wizards and so forth, but to go deeper, how did you get into fantasy, in the sense that, like, were you fans of like Wagner and the Nibelung, or were you Tolkien person, or you Conan? What got you into it?
that's hard to say. I know I read Tolkien years and years ago, and that does resonate with me. And then I just found myself reading other works, Andrew Norton,
Oh, yeah.
Ursula Le Guin.
Oh, classics, yeah.
Yeah. Fritz Lieber,
Nice.
Graham Mouser. So
A lot of these authors you mentioned write about fantastical beings and all sorts of cool creatures
Right.
in their work.
right.
How about you? Any kind of love for those creatures or weird creatures, fantastical creatures?
There are monsters in some of my some of the works, but that's not really where my focus is. It's more the characters, the people that you will identify with. I spent far more time making sure that they're fairly real than, if I need to give you some multi-tentacled monster to fight, then that's just sort of more of a, oh, I need something here. I'm not so concerned about, although, having said that, I'm now remembering that there is a scene in the first novel where they're in the lair of the fire giant and they run across the fire giant's child, who I had to give a name, so he's Snorri. And there's a bit of an encounter, and that's about the most personable I make.
So
of
where
the
does the
ones
action come in? Is it people fighting each other, sword and sorcery, or?
It depends. I don't believe in gratuitous violence.
Yeah.
There's a scene, particularly in the first one, where the main character comes. She's on the trail of a necromancer. He finally catches up with the guy, and so there's a battle there, which he nearly loses because he's outclassed. But there are other bits where they're in a what we would call a flying balloon, which they don't have the technology for. They call it something else. But there are all kinds of hazards in the sky that they have to overcome, like geese, when they get caught in the balloon.
Yeah, speaking of that, it sounds a little steampunky with the balloons and all this. Yeah, I was thinking about. But why don't you let us know about the Aglural, if I said it correctly, cycle, and explain these books, because you have a number of books. It's a series.
It's a series. It's going to be a series of 8, of which there are now 4, and I'm working on the 5th one. I'm hoping to get that out to the editor. What's this? March. So maybe next month. There you go. That's the first one. I've got the next. Then I got 6 and 7 draft. Well, no, I got 6 drafted. 7 is supposed to get drafted this year sometime. And then I have to worry about wrapping the damn thing up.
But what's the world? Is it like a Game of Thrones world or something like
It's
that?
a fantasy world of my invention. It's based mostly on Tolkien, with influences from, as I said, Andrew Norton, Catherine Kurtz, and a few other bits and pieces here and there. Because when I read something that I like, as they say, the highest compliment is imitation.
Sure.
So I borrow maybe something in some form or other.
Now, let me ask you this, because right now we've been talking all fantasy, but you're also known to write a lot of science fiction too, because I've seen that you have a collection of science fiction stories.
I have a collection of science fiction stories.
And what type of science fiction is it? Is it just like post-apocalypse on Earth? Is it space opera? Is it hard science fiction like Heinlein?
It's a variety of things. There's let me see. There's at least one space opera story in there. There's a couple stuff that's more science, hard science.
Yep.
Or I wouldn't say hard science. I'll say more like it's taking scientific principles and just extending them. There's another one that's I look at what might it be like when we actually go colonize another planet. I'm trying to remember what they all are because it's been a while, and I don't have a copy of it with me. But there's a variety. I tried to do a little of everything to give.
Any type of reader willing to read it, right?
Well, anybody who likes science fiction, they'll have a variety of things to entertain themselves. And sometimes it strikes a chord. At the Granite State Comic-Con last September, apparently there was a run on them. As I remember, it's like suddenly people were just picking that up and just buying it. I'm going,
Nice.
where did that come from?
We've got time for one more question.
Yeah,
if you
yeah,
wanna
Tony,
ask it.
Tony, why don't you ask your last question that I knew you wanted to ask?
Well, I was going to
Yeah, go ahead.
ask this, but something else came to mind. You haven't described what the first book is about. We've been talking all around
Yeah.
it. What's the book about?
No, well, the whole series is about the characters have to go find these magic gems because, according to prophecy, they're needed to recreate a magic crown, which will then oust the invaders who have taken over the capital. And so,
So an army came in and took over the capital. And these band of people are trying to find gems to make a
Gems.
crown,
Yeah.
which would do what?
which will then, when worn by the heir to the throne, will complete prophecy and allow the invaders to be defeated.
Gotcha. Okay.
Okay, it's kind of involved, but it's classic fantasy.
Oh, it is, yeah.
Classic fantasy plot, and in the process of these 8 books, you will learn all about these particular characters and get to know them. And I get to do a bunch of other stuff besides, and
Sounds like fun.
it's a lot of fun, and it's resonating with some people, from what I can tell.
Well, why don't you read a little bit so folks can get a general idea?
Okay. Let me find my spot here.
Sure.
Okay, so this is the first chapter out of the first book. The audience hall in Wrightwood Manor was large and stately. White marble and with red veins covered the floor, and a narrow red carpet ran down the middle of the chamber, from the large double doors in the back to the dais at the front. The doors opened, and Father Evan Pierce, a priest of the Order of St. Michael and a demon hunter, strode into the room, followed by 100 Mickeline knights. Each knight wore a breastplate of polished metal emblazoned with a silver sword. The group clanked and clanged across the hall until they reached the end of the carpet. At the foot of the dais, Evan knelt on one knee and bowed his head. The knights behind him did the same. "Your Grace," said Evan. Seated atop the dais, in an elegantly carved chair of bone and ivory, His Grace, Duke Wrightwood, looked at the others in the hall dispassionately. He gestured with one hand. "Arise and report. How fared you in the Marian ruins?" Evan stood and smiled. "Very well, Your Grace. We captured 2 necromancers and killed 2 others. The pentagram they were preparing was cleansed and destroyed, thereby thwarting any plans they had for using it." His Grace pursed his lips. "And what of their leader? Captured or killed?" Evan sighed and frowned. "Neither, I'm afraid. He escaped, vanishing like a ghost, at the end of a difficult battle that almost killed Saralan and me." Duke Wrightwood's jaw tensed a little at this news, and his blue eyes flashed with a fire Evan knew well. "Then you have no clues as to his plans for stealing magic jewelry of great power?" "Not exactly, Your Grace. Because we forced him to flee, he left behind his horse. Inside one of the saddlebags we found a message. He drew out a scroll from behind his belt and handed the parchment to a nearby page, who passed it to His Grace." Duke Wrightwood snatched up the document, unrolled the scroll, and read the message. "Germandon, I believe I found what we've been seeking these many months. If the stories I've heard are true, the prize is in the port town of C. I'm sailing there now, and should arrive in a few days to confirm. I will rendezvous with you at the standard location outside the town of S. Signed, Evelyn, Sailors Guild." Duke Wrightwood lowered the parchment and looked blankly at Evan. "This would seem to confirm the intelligence I've already received. Germandon is in league with thieves." "Yes, and they plan to steal something soon," noted Evan. "We just don't know what," observed His Grace. "Based on the earlier reports, it could be magic jewelry or a magic gem. We don't know where the theft will occur either," said Evan. His Grace raised an eyebrow. "Does it matter? There are several towns of sea, and they are all too far away and not within the duchy. So even if we could arrive in time to stop the theft, we have no jurisdiction." "What about Clearbrook?" asked Evan. "I know it's unlikely, but but it's worth investigating. His Grace sighed. All right, it is worth being certain. Take your men and head out immediately. Evan paused, and Duke Wrightwood sensed the priest had something else in mind. Is there something more? A small indulgence, Your Grace. Go on. The people of Clearbrook are a gentlefolk. Marching into town with 100 men will cause quite a commotion, possibly to the point of dissuading the thief from acting. Since our only hope of finding Germondon is to capture the thief, I suggest I go to Clearbrook myself, under the presumption I'm there to rest. His Grace considered this idea and then shook his head. No. You'll need the support of a few knights, Sir Alan, Sir Ambrose, Sir Geoffrey at the very least. While they are all fine knights, I am certain I can get the support I need from the town guard. A lieutenant in the guard is an old friend of mine. I can also travel faster alone. His Grace rubbed his chin, considering Evan's words. You'll be taking a big risk, but as you say, it is doubtful that they would go to such a sleepy, quiet town. Very well. Go to Clearbrook alone, investigate any unusual activities there. If the thief does show up, apprehend him and keep him from stealing the magic item he wants. Evan bowed. Thank you, Your Grace. I'll leave at once. There you go.
Thank you very much. Great having you on.
Appreciate it.
Thanks.
Yes.
For making the journey up here. And
Sure. Thanks for having me.
Yep, very well. And folks want to check out your work, they can find it on any online bookstore and so forth. So
Yeah,
Absolutely.
any New England Horror Writers Association grouping, if you're there, your books will be there.
Yes,
Yep.
they should be there.
Good.
nice.
Okay, cool.
Thank you very much. We'll be back in a minute. Well, that was a pretty good show tonight.
Yeah, it sure was.
Yeah.
I'm glad that we were able to get two new guests that folks have never seen before that we haven't interviewed prior or
Yeah.
at a convention.
Yeah, I didn't know Richard that well. I'd met him once or twice, and John, I got a real good chance to talk to him before the show, and obviously learned a lot more about him tonight.
Yeah, and I'm the complete opposite.
You knew the other one.
Yeah, exactly, vice versa. Yeah, exactly, which is kind of funny.
Well, thank you everybody for watching tonight's show. We'll be back in April. Anything else?
Yeah, hopefully we'll see someone right here next to us.
I'm hoping so.
Yeah.
We look forward to you coming back if you're watching. Thanks, Sydney. Thank you.